This video is brought to you by
Unholy brats of our devoted circle, the whispers of the forgotten that we offer our souls before their shadows, and the darkness of the moment we guide ourselves as we descend into the eternal, all-consuming abyss that will one day break forth in the earthly world.
and also Patreon. Thanks, guys. I like closure a lot. I've come to realise that as I've gotten older, and I don't like to hang on to theories that have no real basis in reality, but I do like seeing a saga come to an end with some sort of satisfying conclusion. At the same time, I kind of enjoy having that extra step of thought about something left unexplained, especially if the act of not explaining it makes everything around it just that tiny bit creepier. Unexplained creepy things in games sparks up my imagination and has me wondering just how messed up the developers were, or if I'm merely overthinking things and I'm just fishing around for content for a video. I don't know, but the best thing about unexplained mysteries is that no theory is too wild or incorrect. That's some big news for commenters everywhere. Pokémon explains very little. It feels a bit like browsing TikTok and how each community seems to have their own raft of in-jokes that you can put out into the world, but without the most crucial part of the puzzle, the explanation. Pokémon lives in its own world with its own rules and whimsical creatures that can tow continents and set fire to the atmosphere, and it just gleefully carries on without directly addressing how any of this works. And that's a good thing. It would be boring and a bit of a killjoy to break down the science of Pokémon, but this is a franchise that still likes to play it fast and loose when it comes to the supernatural. There are a lot of ghosts in Pokémon games, and I'm not talking about ghost-type Pokémon. This franchise has made it abundantly clear that human ghosts exist in this world, and they like to hang around various haunted locations in these games. Most likely as an homage to various horror stories from Japanese folklore. And I get it, it's best to leave these things open-ended, and I don't really need an explanation of who these people are and what they're doing here, but I am gonna need someone to fill in the blanks on the random ghost girl in X and Y. And I have to specify X and Y because we've had a few random ghost girls in other games. Black and White had the ghost girl on the Marvelous Bridge in the Strange House where you can slowly piece together what's happened to her, and how Cresselia and Darkrai play into it all, and that's fine. I don't need it spelled out for me in big capital letters or anything. I can have a few interactable objects for storytelling and that'll do me just fine. X and Y, however, has an encounter so deliberate and so carefully curated to be cryptic that you can kind of tell that the devs never intended for this to be any more than a mystery. This ghost girl turns up very early in the game, the second floor of a random building in Lumio City, so hardly out of the way at all, and then this infamous cutscene plays where she floats around from behind you and utters the words "No, you're not the one" before floating away. There have been a lot of theories ranging from wild speculation about how she'd only talk to someone with the right trainer ID, to some more concrete theories since there's a similar character who turns up in Mount Pyre in Oras and says the same thing. Except she's not a ghost, so maybe she died in between games, it's hard to tell. I don't know, there's never been any real explanation for something so deliberately designed, and maybe it was an idea for an event that was later dropped since there's not a lot of legendaries in X and Y, or maybe Game Freak wanted to mess around with players, we don't know, and we may never know. And hey, that just makes it all the creepier, and there is Legend ZA to come at some point as well, so these blanks may yet get filled in. I need to know who the one is. Animal Crossing is quietly kinda messed up. It has to be though, doesn't it? You can't have this many adorable animals running around being good neighbours to each other without there being some kind of disastrous undercurrent that would derail the whole operation should it come to light. Like the village in Hot Fuzz. You can't tell me that Tom Nook isn't part of some cult, I won't have it. That Tanuki has many giant balls in many giant pies. Or maybe the issue isn't so much a secret underground society and instead something broader. Some kind of outside influence that dictates how these towns operate? Well, if you know where to look, Animal Crossing hides a dark secret, and the first thing you need to do is develop an obsession with this game so unhealthy that you're playing Animal Crossing well into the early hours of the morning. I've been there before, and honestly, there isn't all that much to do. All of your villagers are asleep and locked away in bed, and the shops are shut too, so it's not like you can go fishing all night for that mad profit. I'm surprised the fish aren't asleep too. So you've really got to want to be awake playing Animal Crossing at 3 in the morning. It's not really the sort of thing that happens on accident. Well, if you're bored of combing the beaches and sidestepping scorpions, you may end up returning home to watch some TV or rearrange your furniture, or really anything that distracts you from your crippling insomnia. Should you so happen to have a TV on at exactly 3:33 AM, the broadcast will suddenly... Oh, okay, we've got aliens now. Those are some legit alien boys. Why do we have aliens though? This is clearly an Easter egg, or more likely a prank by the developers to indicate that something extra spooky is happening, and that the sleepy world of Animal Crossing is being invaded by aliens at the same time once a week. But what's the angle here? The broadcast has popped up in previous Animal Crossing games to roughly the same effect, but missing that extra step of explaining it. Even better, the alien broadcast isn't even hinted at in-game in a conversation with an NPC. It's just this weird thing that happens in the early hours of the morning that you'd tell a friend about, and they'd think that you need to get more sleep and play less Animal Crossing. That is the Nintendo seal of approval of gaslighting. It's hard to comprehend just how old World of Warcraft is. I mean, there is a number for it. We're about 3 weeks away from WoW turning 20 years old, so it is quantifiable, but that is still 2 decades of an online game that has had frequent updates and is still going really strong to this day. Unless it's really new content, every inch of World of Warcraft has been combed over and mined for its secrets, so it's highly unlikely that there's any mysteries that have somehow gone unsolved, right? Haha, well, you'd think, but that doesn't account for unused content, which usually hits the cutting room floor and is swept away from prying eyes. But sometimes we get lucky enough to have something really significant left in that might even be explorable. The Forgotten Crypt is an unassuming location just behind the Tower of Karazhan that, for the longest time, was completely blocked off. There was this locked gate on the front of it, so clearly it's not meant to be explored yet, but you can clearly see that there's stuff in there. How do I get in there? I want to see it! Not to put the cart before the horse, but this crypt has been open for business for the last 7 years, and in roughly the same state it was before this gate was unlocked. But before the patch in 2017, the only way you could enter the Forgotten Crypt was to do some Alt F4ing nonsense you can clip through a wall. Once inside, it doesn't take long for the primary theory as to why the Forgotten Crypt was left unfinished to rear its ugly head. Yeah, I get that this place is a crypt and they're usually full of dead guys, but whoever designed this place clearly intended for this area to end up in a much darker game. But hey, maybe you're in the market for a crypt, so maybe we should look around? Highlights include spacious rooms and high ceilings, as well as mausoleums and huge mass graves. And make sure you check out the 2 centerpieces, this giant pile of bones and the upside down sinners? All of these people who have been left to drown upside down? Well, yeah, I suppose this is a little bit too dark for World of Warcraft actually, and I can understand why it was dropped, but as it turns out, this wasn't the reason at all. In 2014, Blizzard's community manager was asked why the crypt was never used, and simply said that Blizzard changed their minds about using it. So, this horrifyingly grim area was left empty because Blizzard went in a different direction, but that still doesn't explain what the Forgotten Crypt is for, and who decided to drown dozens of people. What kind of quest would have been found here? What kind of backstory would you give to a place so you can justify the mass graves and the giant piles of bones? Someone get the quest writers on the phone ASAP. Most of these mysteries are extremely likely to stay unsolved for the foreseeable future. How could they not though? They're from games that likely aren't interested in giving these mysteries some closure, so we really do have to make do with all of these loose ends. I'm saying this now because recent-ish game releases have left Half-Life in a stronger position than it was in about a decade ago. And now the prospect of a new Half-Life game that does actually expand the lore and fill in some of the blanks isn't such an impossible hope for the future. That being said, there's been about a dozen games or expansion packs, and in that time, we've had very little explained about G-Man. You know, the guy's practically the face of Half-Life as well as a more brain rot-centric part of the internet, and he has some real highlights within these games, but these are all done without really knowing anything about him. That's most of the appeal, to be honest, and a good chunk of the reason why the G-Man is so creepy. His origins can be traced back to Valve employees experimenting with hostile and friendly NPCs before eventually deciding to include a character that is neither hostile nor friendly, which ultimately gave rise to a character with such an eerie omniscience over the Half-Life universe. He appears in the background of several Half-Life games as both a simple Easter egg, but also as a method of showing just how oppressive his presence is in these games. He bookends so much of Half-Life that he literally is watching you for most, if not all of the time. At the end of Half-Life 1, he teleports Gordon Freeman around while talking to him about his employers liking Gordon's work and wanting to use him for something, which is the kind of vagueness that accompanies most of what he does, but it ultimately never gets expanded on. He never gets that cutscene that fills in his backstory or elaborates on his role in this franchise. He's not openly antagonistic to Gordon so long as you do what he says and agree with him, but he seems too powerful and too controlling to be a straight-up ally. We don't know if he's a god, or a self-insert for Gabe Newell, or a meta-commentary on how powerless video game characters really are. We don't have much to go on at all. And there's a chance we might get more info in the future, especially after Half-Life Alyx came out, but there's a larger chance that we get fuck all to work with instead. Bro's a smart dresser though. When you think about it for too long, there's a lot to find creepy about The Sims. Obviously there's the blatant stuff like ghosts and the Grim Reaper, but there's a lot of subtler stuff that might not seem all that disturbing at the time, but with the marinating effect of time, they seem a lot more horrifying. This is something that has persisted through all games in the franchise in one way or another, to the extent that it could be a defining characteristic of The Sims, but all subtlety was dropped for one particular port of The Sims 2 in favour of just the most bizarre gaming experience around. What the fuck was going on in the DS port of The Sims 2? Alright, so wind the clock back to 2005 when I was 10 and less hairy, and I wanted to play The Sims 2 because friends had mentioned how cool it was, but my family didn't own a computer powerful enough to play it. I know it was the mid-2000s and it struggled with Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. Weird to think that these days a watch could probably run The Sims 2. Anyway, so my alternatives were limited, but seeing as though I owned a DS, it felt natural to try my hand at the port and make do with whatever the compromise had been to get The Sims on a Nintendo console. To my shock, it was more of an objective-based adventure game where, yes, you are given a fair amount of freedom with how you design areas and rooms and meet the needs of Sims like in the main series, but also you're in charge of a hotel in the middle of nowhere and the residents are not your typical Sims crowd. It's hard to explain without examples, but one of the first characters you meet is this mob boss, and the need that he has that you need to meet so that he is happy with you is that he needs help killing the mayor. Oh, that's... I can't do that in The Sims? Can I? It's a request that comes out of nowhere and is played completely straight, just without the moral ambiguity of helping a mobster blow up someone and then bury a wriggling suitcase in the desert. It's not even the questionable requests that reinforce this game's very creepy vibe. It might also have something to do with the alien invasion that apparently is fairly frequent and shit. And the nuclear reactor that powers the hotel, and this guy whose girlfriend was killed by scorpions, and his Bigfoot for some reason as well. Like, I don't know if it's coming across just how bizarre this game is, and I will fully accept that The Sims in general has some weirdness to it, but the DS port of The Sims 2 is in a whole different league. There's this persistent alien presence over everything, and you're constantly fending off alien invasions with a water gun and performing autopsies on alien corpses. And if you've got time, there's also a cult that needs stopping with help from an undead mummy. And there's is that a fucking robo-gorilla? It's a robo-gorilla. Who made this game, and what were they going for? Why does your character have a sanity meter? Why is that a thing that is required for your character to have in this game? I mean, obviously he needs it, but, like, why? Supposedly, the plot was inspired by Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft, which I get, but why all of this for a Sims game? I didn't need this in my life. And yeah, that's my list of the biggest unsolved creepy mysteries in video games. Do you agree? Is there something else you have at number one? Let me know in a comment down below, and if you've enjoyed it, leave a like and hit subscribe for more, and hit that bell for videos in the future. The last video I made was about games that are doomed to fail, so make sure you go watch that. And I also want to thank my top supporters on Patreon, including Sarah Malion, The Green Scorpion, and Lima Pro. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.